Between 5,000 and 4,000 years ago, before the flood, life on Earth operated under completely different rules than those we know today. In this primordial period, Earth was a lush paradise where nature reigned supreme. But this beauty hid a silent nightmare. While plants grew without limits, colossal creatures roamed the forests. And in the first human communities, beings that were not entirely human ruled with an iron fist, demanding tributes that no one dared to refuse. In this documentary, we will reconstruct what it was like to survive in this antediluvian world, explore what it meant to walk among gigantic predators, uncover the forbidden technology that emerged from nowhere, and understand what really happened when the children of God decided to descend to Earth. The last detail will explain why total destruction was the only possible way out. Leaving home in those days meant stepping into a world that had not been designed for the human scale. To walk across the land was to move through a colossal, overwhelming environment. Trees rose so high that their crowns vanished into the upper mist, invisible to the naked eye. Giant ferns reached nearly 50 feet in height, forming a continuous green canopy that blocked almost all direct sunlight. And yet the world was not dark. A constant diffused luminosity bathed everything, touching the skin gently as if the sky were covered by a permanent filter, illuminating without straining the eyes. Many scholars argue that according to the oldest records, a vast layer of water vapor once enveloped the entire planet, a natural greenhouse that stabilized the climate, retained heat, and kept humidity constant. There were no devastating storms, no sudden swings in temperature. Life flourished on extreme scales. Tree trunks were so wide that 20 people holding hands could not encircle them. Some of these colossi were hollow inside and served as shelter for entire families. Harvesting fruit was no simple task. It required ropes, organized teams, and climbs that took hours on living structures as tall as modern buildings. But vegetation was only the first challenge. The true warning of danger came when the ground began to tremble. You stopped. The silence broke, and then the herd appeared. In the book of Job 40, there is the description of a creature called Behemoth, a being of incomparable strength, bones like beams of bronze, muscles like cables of iron. The description echoes perfectly the great sauropods, colossal creatures that grazed while consuming dozens of short tons of vegetation per day. Their droppings formed steaming mounds, fertilizing the earth with an almost supernatural power. But the stench was so intense that no one dared approach those mountains of living waste. And danger did not come only from the ground. In the skies, flying reptiles with wingspans of up to 40 feet, alongside gigantic birds of prey, crossed the air above the villages. They fished in the rivers, patrolled the valleys, and occasionally attacked. Distracted children could vanish in an instant. For this reason, roofs were reinforced with wood and stone, walls were built to strategic heights, and no one ventured out alone when the sun began to sink below the horizon. The divine command was clear: have dominion over the animals. But how do you dominate creatures with 20 short tons of brute force and an insatiable appetite? Survival depended on intelligence. Only the alert prospered. The slow, the careless, the weak were eliminated by the ruthless necessity of nature. To live in that world was to wage a silent war every single day, a battle in which every decision could be the last. And yet animals were not the greatest danger. The true nightmare began when humanity, already accustomed to the horrors of the earth, lifted its eyes to the sky. Strange lights descended from the firmament, not like stars, nor like the moon, nor like meteors tearing through the air. They were luminous points that moved with terrifying precision, controlled, conscious, deliberately directed toward the most prosperous regions of the earth. They did not come as thieves in the night. According to ancient texts, especially the Book of Enoch, these beings were called the Watchers. They manifested in broad daylight, entered cities as rightful lords, bearing an authority no one dared to challenge. The first shock was their stature. They stood between 8 and 10 feet tall, surpassing any known human giant. But size was only a detail compared to their appearance. Their skin did not look like ordinary flesh. It emitted a soft, constant glow like heated metal reflecting an inner light, an ethereal radiance that made them visible even in the deepest darkness. Their eyes, large and piercing, radiated a light of their own, as if they contained fire or imprisoned stars. And most disturbing of all, they spoke every language. They knew the secret names of every person. They knew family histories never spoken aloud. Nothing was hidden from them. Then came the gifts, promises of a better future, seeds that germinated in half the time, guaranteeing abundant harvests in periods of scarcity. Advanced metallurgical techniques that produced weapons and tools far superior to anything that had ever existed. Revelations about the movement of the stars, the course of the planets, and medicinal plants capable of curing diseases once considered fatal. The Book of Enoch records the names of these leaders and their domains. Shemihaza, the leader of the Watchers, who led the rebellion. Azazel, who taught the forging of swords, spears, shields, and armor, inaugurating the age of organized warfare. Barachiel, who revealed the secrets of astrology and the signs of the heavens. It was a massive dumping of knowledge, something that would have taken dozens of generations to develop naturally, all delivered at once. A gift that seemed to have fallen from the sky, but every blessing has a price, and they did not ask for gold or silver. The price was something far more valuable. Genesis 6 describes what happened with brutal frankness. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives of all whom they chose. There was no request, there was no consent. It was possession, absolute dominion. Families watched powerless, hiding in their homes as their daughters were selected and taken by beings who appeared divine. And when these forbidden unions occurred, something fundamental was corrupted. Human biology was altered, violated by a force that did not belong to the earth. The women became pregnant, but what grew in their wombs was not human. The pregnancy followed its course, but the birth revealed something profoundly wrong. The children were born nearly 3 feet long, with eyes already open, rigid muscles, and a hunger that nothing seemed able to satisfy. Experienced midwives accustomed to human birth knew in the very first moment of pain that this was no ordinary child. The newborns of these forbidden unions entered the world already around 3 feet tall, with abnormal strength and conscious movements. This was not an isolated mutation or a genetic accident. It was a pattern, the emergence of a new species, a hybrid between the celestial and the human. The mothers suffered extreme pain as if their bodies were being torn apart from the inside, and many did not survive childbirth. Apocryphal texts describe these births as divine signs, miracles sent from heaven. But in the case of the Nephilim, the miracle was in fact the beginning of a nightmare. Their growth was unnatural. Within a few months, they were already crawling across the ground. By around 2 years of age, they possessed the strength of an athletic adult, breaking furniture unintentionally, ripping doors from their hinges with a shove, injuring other children in play without understanding their own physical limits. By around 5 years old, they already had the size of a grown man. By 10, they exceeded 10 feet in height. In full maturity, many reached 12 to 13 feet. True living colossi. Some ancient texts speak of even greater giants, possibly hyperbolic language, but the central message remains clear and terrifying. They were biological titans, capable of tearing young trees from the ground as if they were simple branches. They lifted rocks that 10 strong men could not move even with collective effort. They killed wild animals with their bare hands, snapping bones with a single blow. But the most disturbing aspect was not the body. It was the mind that inhabited that colossal physical structure. They learned with frightening speed. Still children, they spoke complex languages and grasped mathematical and philosophical concepts far beyond human development of the time. But they lacked something essential: empathy. The capacity to feel compassion simply did not exist. It was not something to be learned. It was absent from their very essence. The Book of Enoch describes how these beings devoured the labor of men. First, they consumed all the agricultural production of the villages, then the herds. Next, the wild game. Nothing remained for ordinary humans. They saw people as resources, not as equals. Cattle, tools, property. Why obey a human father if you can crush him with one hand? Even while still young, many already killed on impulse for anger, for curiosity, for boredom, without remorse, and without any moral understanding of what they had done. When they reached full maturity, they decided they no longer wanted to be sons. They wanted to be kings. Imagine rulers over 13 feet tall with incalculable strength and an appetite equal to that of hundreds of adult men. There was no police force. There were no courts. There were no laws that could be enforced against them. The word of the giant was absolute law. Anyone who dared to question it simply disappeared without trial, without record, without explanation. Genesis describes these hybrids as Gibborim, the mighty ones of antiquity, and also as Anashim Hashem, literally, men of renown. They were the celebrities of the ancient world. Legendary heroes, mythological champions, untouchable rulers whose presence inspired admiration and terror at the same time. They built palaces of rough stone on fertile plains, raised fortress cities with massive walls, and demanded heavy tribute, grain, livestock, precious metals, and most terrifying of all, young women. Colossal statues were erected in their honor. Temples rose where sacrifices were performed. The hierarchy was simple and brutal. They at the top, humans at the bottom, treated as servants or as cattle. But there was one problem that could not be ignored: hunger. How do you sustain a population of giants that consumes the equivalent of hundreds of people each day? The Book of Enoch describes the escalation of horror in disturbing detail. First, they consumed all the harvest, then the domestic animals. When that was exhausted, they turned their eyes toward humans themselves. Ancient Jewish traditions state that something even darker then emerged: cannibalism. The consumption of human flesh and blood became a recurring practice, and in some cases a public ritual. Creation had been completely inverted. Altars were raised where people were sacrificed before terrified crowds. Children grew up witnessing these scenes, learning from an early age that human life had no value, that it could be discarded like trash. Genesis uses a specific word to define the condition of the earth at that time: Hamas. This is not ordinary violence, but unjust violence, brutal oppression, systematic cruelty. Murders were daily occurrences. Bodies were left in the streets as silent warnings to anyone who considered disobedience. Scripture summarizes that era with one of the darkest statements in the entire Bible: every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil continually. It was not a momentary outburst of rage. It was a permanent state of corruption. The Greek legends that speak of titans devouring their own children did not arise from nothing. They are distorted echoes of traumatic memories from this forgotten age. Goliath, centuries later, at around 9.5 feet tall, was nothing more than a late shadow, a weakened genetic remnant of what these beings had been at the height of their power. Fear was the constant atmosphere, the invisible air that filled humanity's lungs with daily dread. But the Nephilim were not the only ones responsible for the total collapse of civilization. Their parents, the Watchers, remained active, and they continued teaching. Forbidden knowledge flowed without restraint, and suddenly, ordinary men gained access to weapons, techniques, and practices that turned the world into a zone of supernatural warfare. People began to master skills that by the natural pace of history would not emerge for another 1,000 years. Imagine a society that leaps from stone and wood directly into advanced metallurgy within a single generation. This was not gradual progress. It was direct technology transfer, a cursed gift that destroyed any social balance. The Book of Enoch is extremely specific about who taught what. It states that Azazel taught humanity how to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. Before that, conflicts were resolved through physical strength or rudimentary hunting tools. Survival depended on courage and bodily skill. But after Azazel, war became systematic, organized, and industrialized. Blades that never lost their edge, metals that gleamed in the sun and sliced through flesh as if it were paper, armor capable of withstanding fatal blows. Mortality exploded. Entire villages became permanent battlefields. But Azazel taught more than how to kill. He taught how to seduce, how to manipulate, how to dominate through desire. He revealed the secrets of the metals of the earth and the art of shaping them into bracelets, ornaments, and jewelry. The Book of Enoch states that he introduced the use of antimony to darken and color the eyelids. An aesthetic innovation that may seem trivial today, but in that primitive era had a devastating impact. Vanity became a weapon. Human value began to be measured by appearance. Women competed desperately for the attention of the fallen gods, adorning themselves with cosmetics and jewels. Men competed for visual status and symbolic power. A culture of extreme superficiality emerged, where beauty became currency and an instrument of domination. And it did not stop there. Another watcher, Armoros, taught enchantments and spells. Kazdeja revealed the use of roots, potions, and substances, what today we would call pharmakeia. The chemical spiritual use of compounds to alter consciousness, open mental doors, and access forbidden realities. Barakiel taught astrology, diverting the human gaze from the creator to the creation, leading people to guide their lives by the movement of the stars rather than by divine revelation. Kokabil taught the constellations. Penemu taught writing and the use of knowledge to deceive. Humanity began to worship the heavens instead of the one who created them. Genesis 4 confirms this cultural explosion through the lineage of Cain. Tubal-Cain appears as the master of all craftsmen of bronze and iron, producing tools and weapons that changed the course of history. Jubal created complex musical instruments, harps and flutes, capable of producing hypnotic sounds. Music, which should have lifted the spirit, was transformed into constant noise. Feasts lasted for days, rhythms dulled the conscience, silence disappeared. It was like placing a nuclear reactor in the hands of a child. The technical capability existed, moral maturity did not, and the earth sank ever deeper into Hamas. They possessed walled cities, lethal weapons, continuous entertainment, and practices that today we would call biological manipulation. In many respects, they were technologically superior to the modern world. But spiritually, they were dead. This technology opened an unbridgeable abyss between two types of people who coexisted on the same earth. While one group raised empires of stone and metal, the other struggled to preserve original humanity, living in leather tents, safeguarding the memory of a world before total corruption. In practice, there were two humanities inhabiting the same planet, opposed like oil and water, incapable of mixing without destruction. On one side stood the civilization of Cain. Scripture states that Cain built the first city and named it Enoch after his son. Not the righteous Enoch of the line of Seth, but another, a name repeated in opposing contexts. Imagine an antediluvian metropolis, towering walls of rough stone to contain giant predators, polished bronze gates reinforced with knowledge transmitted by the watchers. Watchtowers dominating the horizon. Inside these cities, noise never ceased. Tubal-Cain's forges hammered metal day and night. Jubal's music echoed through the plazas. Commerce was frantic. Cultic prostitution flourished. Giants were worshipped as living gods. Luxury, pleasure, and fear coexisted in the same space. Outside the walls, in the mountains and elevated plains, lived the lineage of Seth. Genesis 4:26 records a turning point. Then people began to call upon the name of the Lord. They chose the opposite path. They did not build walled cities. They lived as nomads in tents in direct contact with creation, not artificial manufacture. They rejected the technologies of war and the occult arts of the cities. They had no armies. They had no giants as kings. They had only the oral tradition passed down from Adam, the memory of the garden and the promise of future redemption. For generations, this physical and spiritual separation preserved the line of the promise. But then the barrier was broken. Genesis 6:1-2 describes the collapse. When the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, many interpretations focus only on the angels. But there is an essential human layer in this text, the mixing of lineages. Godly men from the line of Seth began to look toward the cities of Cain. They saw women with painted eyes, a practice attributed to Azazel according to Enoch. They saw luxury, music, power, and apparent security. They descended from the mountains. Seduction overcame holiness. Tents were exchanged for the comfort of stone cities. Marriages took place. The separation dissolved. And when the final barrier fell, urban corruption spread like a virus. The flood did not come because some were evil. It came because even the good had become corrupted. Society had become homogeneous in evil. But while human morality was rotting, something even more grotesque was advancing silently. Genesis 6:12 states, "All flesh had corrupted its way." In Hebrew, the expression is basar, and the verb used is shachat, to ruin, deform, destroy, corrupt in an irreversible way. This is not merely moral sin. The text suggests a structural corruption of creation itself. Ancient sources such as Jasher and the Book of Jubilees describe forbidden mixtures between species, the crossing of seeds that were never meant to meet, what today we would cautiously call primitive genetic engineering, a direct violation of the boundaries established by God. Ancient mythologies echo this in distorted form. Centaurs, minotaurs, chimeras, hybrid creatures spread throughout Greek, Egyptian, and Babylonian traditions. Were they merely fantasies or fragmented memories of an age in which the barriers of creation were breached? In Genesis 1, God establishes a fundamental principle. Each creature is to reproduce according to its kind. That was creation's safety lock, and it had been broken. When the Watchers shattered those boundaries, the result was a spectacle of horrors. Unstable creatures emerged. Unsustainable predators came into existence. Animals trapped between incompatible natures lived in constant pain, unable to fulfill any balanced function within creation. The food chain collapsed. The entire world became an open-air laboratory without limits, without ethics, without conscience. This completely changes how the flood is perceived. Many see it only as divine wrath, but perhaps it was something different. Something more precise, a surgical intervention, a kind of cosmic chemotherapy. The code of life had become so deeply contaminated that there was no longer a way to separate the healthy from the diseased. The only option was to eliminate the corrupted cells and begin again. It was no longer about individual innocence or guilt. While biology collapsed, In the stone cities, human society plunged into absolute barbarity. The only law was the force of the strongest, and one man transformed this logic into poetry. The Bible preserves the terrifying declaration of Lamech, a descendant of Cain. The first poem recorded in Scripture does not speak of love or hope. It speaks of murder. I have killed a man for wounding me, and a young man for striking me. The disproportion is shocking. A shove became a death sentence. Lamech did not merely kill, he boasted. If Cain is avenged 7 times, Lamech 70 times 7. There, the law of infinite vengeance was born. There were no courts. There were no judges. There was no police, only armed clans, fortified cities, and giants dominating by brute force. Crossing the path of a man of renown or a powerful rich man like Lamech could mean immediate death. And if the victim's family dared to complain, they were eliminated as well. Bodies remained scattered in the streets until they rotted or were devoured by altered animals, creatures that had adapted to feed on the corpses that accumulated in urban centers. Empathy, that invisible link that connects human beings, had completely evaporated. Genesis states that the earth was full of violence. The Hebrew word used there is Hamas. It doesn't just mean physical violence. It means systematic cruelty, fanatical oppression, absolute contempt for the life of another. It is the total collapse of human dignity. Women began to be accumulated as trophies of war, negotiable property, bought, sold, traded like commodities. Lamech was the first to deliberately break the pattern of monogamy, taking 2 women for himself and institutionalizing a new model of domination that spread like a plague. The human being ceased to be a person, became a resource. Genesis then delivers its final verdict, dry and merciless. Every imagination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil continually. Try to imagine what that means. There were no good days. There were no spontaneous acts of kindness. There were no moral exceptions. The collective mind was tuned to a single frequency, unceasing evil, as if the very ability to conceive goodness had been surgically removed from society. It was a psychopathic civilization in its purest form. Violence was not a deviation. It was the norm. Peace was not an exception. It was non-existent. And while blood flowed through the gutters of stone cities, something began to change above human heads. The sky, the primordial greenhouse, that vapor layer, which for millennia had protected the earth, stabilized the climate, and kept the world fertile, began to fail. For the first time in living memory, people felt something strange on their skin. Not fear, cold, something physical, unknown, unnatural for that world. A silent omen that the system sustaining life was entering collapse. The sky was changing, and judgment had already begun. No one knew exactly what was happening because no one had ever seen anything like it before. Remember the vapor canopy that surrounded the earth and kept everything stable? Suddenly, it began to break down. For the first time in human history, people felt a chill on their skin. It was not fear, it was temperature. A cold wind began to blow with an unfamiliar force. Men and women who had lived for hundreds of years in a perfect tropical climate had never seen their own breath condense in the air. Now they did. A visible sign that something fundamental in the world was changing. Genesis 2 is explicit in stating that until then there had been no rain. The water cycle functioned differently, sustained by that natural greenhouse covering the planet. But then clouds began to form. Not light and fleeting, but dense gray heavy masses blocking the diffused light that had always illuminated the earth. Visual panic was immediate, and then came a sound no one recognized. Thunder echoed for the first time, a violent primal roar that tore through the sky. There was no ancestral memory for it, no reference point, only instinctive terror. And then the first drop fell. Genesis describes the moment with almost surgical precision. On that same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. It was not just heavy rain. Imagine the ground exploding beneath your feet. The phrase "fountains of the great deep" suggests vast subterranean reservoirs of water under extreme pressure, tectonic plates giving way, fissures opening, colossal jets of water erupting from the Earth's crust, while the sky itself collapsed. It was a double assault, a simultaneous catastrophe. Water from above and water from below. At first, some may have tried to drink the water falling from the sky, thinking it was temporary. Others ran to their stone palaces, trusting the engineering inherited from the Watchers to protect them. But the water rose dozens of feet within minutes. Rivers overflowed instantly. Entire cities built in valleys vanished within the first hour. Walls once considered impregnable, built to keep enemies out, became fatal traps, holding the water inside and turning urban centers into deadly aquariums where thousands drowned slowly. In the midst of this absolute chaos, something improbable happened. A single wooden vessel began to float, a strange rectangular structure with no sails, no oars, built by an old man named Noah, a man who had been mocked for decades, while the most advanced, violent, and biologically corrupted civilization in human history sank into the mud. A door was shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. The greatest civilization ever to exist on Earth was erased so completely that today many believe it was nothing more than myth, but it left behind a warning. And if you want to go deeper into this pre-flood world, to understand what life was like when giants walked the earth, and how all of this came to an end, we have an exclusive film that reconstructs this era based on ancient texts. That's the suggestion, and I'll see you soon.